Got it. The meeting is being live streamed. We are now starting the webinar. We're all here. Dan, welcome.
Hey.
You missed all of the hoo-ha, but that's okay.
You can start over. I just want to hear about Devin and Mitch and Gabe.
Good to see you, Dan.
How are you, man? I haven't seen you. You're all tan. Your travels are treating you well, eh, brother?
We are live. We are recording. Welcome. Professional speakers share their perspectives on love. And what an appropriate day for this. It is Valentine's Day here in the United States of America. And that's where all of my speakers are, as far as I know. We're all located in the United States of America at this point. And we're coming to you with a very special presentation today. This is a membership benefit of the members of Live on Purpose Central. And we are also making this available to friends and people who would like to join us here today live on YouTube. I see that there are a number of you who have joined us already live on YouTube. Welcome. We are so grateful to spend this time with you today and to share some perspectives on love. The book that I'm referring to today, you've heard me refer to before. The Love Choice. This is a compilation work. 17 professional speakers have shared their perspectives on love, coming from very different angles sometimes. And I've invited some of those speakers to join me here today. Authors, speakers, powerful influencers who are also my friends. And I am so honored to call them friends and that they would spend some of their time with me and with us here today. Let's jump in. Those of you who are actually in the Zoom webinar, you are welcome to interact with us through the Q&A down there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The chat will remain open if you'd like to talk to each other there in the chat. For those of you who are on YouTube, we welcome you. You can put your comments and give your little thumbs up and like it and share this with other people so that they can see what's going on here today. Without further ado, we're going to jump in, and the first guest that I would like to introduce you to today is none other than Michelle McCullough. Michelle is a speaker and an author. She, in fact, where did I put it? Oh, I've got my stack of books right here. I grabbed a few off of my shelf, and Michelle, this is the one that I found. Make It Happen Blueprint. This isn't the only thing that Michelle has published. She does training on organization and efficiency, and she has helped me to learn some things about how to run my life. She is also a past president of the National Speakers Association Mountain West chapter, and one of my dear friends and colleagues, Michelle McCullough. Come talk to us, will you?
Dr. Paul, thank you for having me. And this is so fun to be with you and with all of our friends having this conversation today. And I know it's Valentine's, but I'm going to derail us for just a minute. Because when I put a chapter into this book, and I'm somebody who believes in love, I'm somebody who cares about relationships, but I also know at the end of the day, wherever you are in your Valentine's experience today or in the future, whether you currently have a significant other or you are hoping for one, or maybe you're totally happy you don't have one, today I'm going to talk to you about the relationship that you have with yourself and how you choose to love into who you are so that you can be the best version of yourself. And one of the things that I feel, I mean, if we had a lot of time, obviously I can talk for long periods of time without any issue, but we have limited time today. So I'm going to focus on one specific issue. And that is that I believe that as humans, we have within us an innate drive for challenge and change. And we want to grow and develop and become good humans. And what that means is that because of that, we have thoughts that come into our mind on a regular basis that excite us and ignite us. And yet many of us will put them into a box labeled someday and put them in the corners of our mind that we never go after them. And yet I believe that your dreams are, and your goals and even your ideas are intended to help you progress. If I have found in my work and my research that happiness is one of my favorite principles, it's something that we all desire, even if we think we don't. And yet where there's a lack of purpose in our lives, there's a lack of progress. And where there's a lack of progress, there is a lack of happiness or fulfillment and contentment. And what that means is that for each of us, we have to have something, a goal, a dream, a hobby, a vision. And some people get that through business. Some people get that through running. Some people get that through needlework or even doing puzzles, whatever that is for you. The coupling piece of this is that you have to love yourself and your dreams and give them space enough to fail. And it might mean that you try things and they don't work, or in the beginning, you hope that it's going to be exciting and it doesn't quite happen the way that you want it to, and you are discouraged and you're tempted not to move forward. And yet I know this one fundamental truth that has changed everything for me, and that is that regret feels worse than failure. And in my experiences in life with all the goals and dreams that have come my way, I have constantly thought to myself, okay, this is scary, and I know it is, but I also know it's important and powerful for me to grow and develop as the human that I want to become. I also know it's important to give this example to others. And it's interesting because as somebody who goes after my dream living and make it happen life, some years are better than others and some goals are better than others. And at the same time, I had a dear old college friend find me at the See's Candies in Orem, Utah. And she pulled me aside and she said, Michelle, I love watching what you do, and even when you try and fail, because it gives me permission to try too. So if you love yourself and you love the people around you, don't put your dreams in a lonely box labeled someday. Pull them out and try. Studies have shown that even just trying your goals and dreams will make you happier than believing that and then actually accomplishing them. So even if you don't think you can finish them, try, move forward, love yourself enough to fail, and remember that you matter in your relationships, so that if you can move some of these little pieces and goals and dreams and hobbies into who you are, you'll actually be better able to show up to love others because you've loved yourself first.
Michelle, that is so awesome. You know what? In my work, as I've helped people from the position of professional psychology, they understand how important it is to love and honor and respect other people, but they often forget about that number one relationship. They forget that their relationship with themselves is actually a relationship. Now, I love the way that you've taken that on for us here today. Awesome. Hey, I'm always wondering what's going to happen with our panel. Karen, I think, has a couple of thoughts also about what you just shared, Michelle. Karen.
I would love to be on the same level as Michelle's thought process, but yes, I have several thoughts that when Valentine's Day comes, I want to interrupt and just say one thing. Each of us have a copy of this book, and each of us' chapter is entitled, and our picture appears on the cover. So mine doesn't say love on the title, but mine says lose the weight and do it now. And Michelle spoke, yes, there, each version.
Here's Michelle, right there. Russ has got his up. Russ, show that again. Let's put you up here as well.
The brilliance of the planning of Devin or whoever was brilliant enough to do this. But mine talks about not waiting to do the things you want. And Michelle talked about loving yourself and not putting our ideas in a box. So I want to tell you a couple of things that I wrote about and that I think about a great deal. If you saw me in person, you would see that I have a few pounds that I could lose. And so I entitled my book, Lose the Weight, but I didn't spell it weight like pounds. I spelled it like weight, like put something off to the future.
Hey, Karen,
keep putting it off.
Hold on a minute.
Yes.
These people don't even know who you are yet.
Oh, I'll let you tell them.
And they deserve to know, because you are an amazing, inspiring speaker, trainer, author who gave me, and you just kind of spoiled it. Oh. I'm just kidding you. The thing that I wanted to point out here is that you are the first one who gave me a new view of this particular word. Weight loss. Lose the weight. And you spelled it in a very specific way. I'm going to let you continue with what you started there. But this is such a powerful concept that helps people to get out of their way, whether it's with their health or their relationships or with their businesses. It's just such a powerful idea. And I just wanted to give you some props as I introduce my good friend, Karen Lindsay. Take it away.
Thank
Karen.
you. It's very easy to put things off till someday, to put things off till you're good enough, smart enough, skinny enough, whatever enough. And you end up waiting and missing the opportunities in life. This past weekend, as we watched the Olympics in Salt Lake, I realized 20 years ago, I took an opportunity to work for the games and be very, very involved in that. So as I went to see that Olympic torch relit in Salt Lake City, man, it choked me up. I am so glad I had that experience. And I didn't wait until something more ideal came up, because physically it was hard and there were lots of things, but I didn't wait. And I look at each time that I went forward in my life and didn't wait and did the things I want to. Let me give you a specific example that I talk about in my chapter. In eastern Utah and Colorado, there is a part of the Green River where you can run the river, and you have to get passes, and it's very logistically difficult to get the opportunity. But I had the opportunity to run the river, and I knew one thing that you had to do is you had to wear a specific class of life jacket to be allowed on the river. And I was worried that I would get there and they wouldn't have a life jacket to fit me, you know, to fit all my great curves. I called ahead and they said, oh, we have a really large life jacket. Now I would have driven clear to the middle of nowhere and tried to put on that life jacket only to find out that it was 8 inches too small to fit around me. And I didn't wait. I made the calls. I worked with the most wonderful lady, and I got to go and run the river through the gates of Lador. We were on the river for 5 days in the wilderness area of Colorado and Utah. It was so amazing, but I didn't wait. I had to go for it right then, and I had to go for it, although the size of the life jacket wasn't what I would have envisioned. But I had to go for it right now. And I've discovered 2 things that I want to share with you, 2 principles. If you're looking for love, first of all, you need to look inward. You need to look inside yourself and find the things you want to do and the things you love and go for them and be enough, even if there's not outward things to reinforce and build you up. When you hear my whole story, I've had a lot of experiences of job losses and job changes I would have never, ever set out for. And I had to begin to learn that my job wasn't who I am. And all of my esteem and myself can't come for that. So one principle, look inward. And the second is look heavenward. All of us can have an opportunity to look for a divine being we believe in. We can look outward for reinforcement from others. We can choose to make this life an amazing, loving, adventurous thing, but we have to do it right now. We have to lose the weight, and we can't just keep waiting. We have to keep working on that. I've had some amazing experiences in my life when I didn't wait for life to be aligned perfectly. And some wonderful things come out of the seeming disappointments. I was living in Seattle, working there, hated that town, hated it. Got laid off from my job, so I took up sailing. I don't know how well I can show you this. This happens to be a boat called Lady Washington. This is in the very northwest corner of the United States. The mountains you can see behind this boat, if you can see it, Al, are the Olympic Peninsula, the northernmost coast of the United States. And this boat is shooting her cannon at us because we're beating her in a boat race. This is the boat that is featured in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And I've sailed her many times, had amazing experiences on her, but I didn't wait. I didn't wait until life was perfect. This little girl that I am from Utah that's far more familiar with riding a horse than sailing on a sailboat, I talked my way into being a crew member and sailed on these boats. And I've literally sailed into some amazing adventures, but I had to love myself enough to let myself do this. and be so far out of my comfort zone. But it created a life that I never dreamed I could live. Dr. Paul, will volley back to you, or if there are questions.
Oh, I love that. I had forgotten the part about the sailing, Karen, which is so cool. I mean, how many experiences are available to us if we lose the wait? If we stop waiting for life to be perfect, if we jump in, and you're such a good example of that, Karen. And I just appreciate you sharing that with us here today. Thank you. Let's go next to Dr. Russ. How you feeling? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready.
I'm doing well. I'm ready.
Are you ready? Dr.
I
Russ
am.
Gaede is a colleague of mine. In fact, Russ used to have an office right down the hall here from me at Live on Purpose Central, where he's been serving and blessing people. And he wrote a book. This caught my attention years ago. Playing 20 questions with your fiance. And I had a conversation with Russ about this book and this concept on my podcast. How long ago has it been, Russ?
Oh, it's been a number of years.
Have you noticed time accelerates as you get older?
Yes. Yeah. I think the book, yeah, it was published in 2012. So, and I'm still selling copies.
Well, Russ, you had some good ideas in that book, and then you also made a contribution to this book. Now, let me just, before you start and share some of your ideas, though, Russ, I want to go back to something that Karen introduced to us just a minute ago, and that is that this book is a compilation, but I didn't mention until Karen brought it up that each book looks different for each author, for each contributing author, where their own title, there you go, Russ, you've got yours up. The Red Thread of Relationships is the title of your book. You've got your picture there between two of our Hall of Fame speakers, Chad Hymas and Dan Clark.
Who's with us today.
And then on the backside is the marketing copy for each contributing author for their own cover. Kind of a neat thing. We did this for our chapter of the National Speakers Association, and that's why you're going to see different versions of this book that I refer to as the Love Choice, because that's the title of my chapter. But Russ, you've got some ideas that you wanted to share with us here today. I'm going to yield the mic to you. Enlighten us.
Thank you. This is a wonderful event. I love what's being said. You know, really, Michelle hit it on the head with you have to love yourself. And Karen, don't wait to love yourself. Do it now, and you'll be happier. It'll be amazing, the transformation. And with those two thoughts, my thought directly went to, there are things in our lives that we don't like about ourselves, or we wish were changed, or whatever that might be. Learn to accept yourself. I have Tourette's, a neurological disorder causing motor and vocal tics. It took me a long time to learn to accept that and to love myself in spite of and because of that. And people ask, if you could change that, would you take it away? And I don't think I would, because of the experiences and the growth that I've gained and continue to gain because of that. I'm very well aware of my tics, but I don't let it hold me down. And I think that is how I've learned to love myself. And as Michelle pointed out, I'm doing that. Excuse me. For me, the biggest part of love is communication. Learning to communicate your needs, not to yourself, and acknowledging your needs, but also acknowledging and sharing your needs with others. And that's really important. That's what my book, Playing 20 Questions with Your Fiancé, is all about, is asking the questions that need to be asked that sometimes we don't want to ask before we get married. Now, excuse me, the argument is that divorce and separation happen over the top 3 topics of sex, time, and money. And I disagree. I think relations break up over lack of communication. Having that love of the other person enough to share yourself and enough to ask the questions, enough to love enough to ask the hard questions and to share is, I think, one of the biggest points of love that we often miss. So learn to communicate, ask the tough questions. You're not always going to get the answer you want. And that's where the aspect of forgiveness comes in. I define forgiveness as giving up hope for a changed past, giving up that hope that things will have been different. Because when we get frustrated, we're often saying, I wish you wouldn't have, I wish I wouldn't have, I wish you would have, I wish I would have. Well, it's too late for that to happen. So forgiving and moving forward is probably the biggest showing of love that I can think of. Don't wait to forgive. Don't wait to communicate. Love yourself enough to communicate with yourself and acknowledge your needs, and love yourself enough to show that respect to the other person. And I'm not talking just in significant other relationships. I'm talking in your everyday communication. Sometimes we communicate better outside our significant relationships, and we let our significant relationships kind of suffer. But we spend more time with our significant relationships. Take the time to connect with your significant others, whether it's your family, your spouse, your children, your close friends. Share that love with others. Learn to forgive, learn to communicate. And it's not, my book, Playing 20 Questions Your Fiance, Roy talks about before you get married. But number one, those questions are ones you need to continually ask. And my next book, Playing 20 Questions with Your Spouse, Keeping the Flame Alive, will be out here hopefully in the next about 6 months. I'm going to be on an international flight this week, flying to Africa, and it's coming with me. I'm going to be working on those edits and getting it finished so I can have it out there. So play 20 questions and learn to love each other and to love yourself, and don't wait to do it.
Russ, something that I've loved about your career and what you've shared with people is this idea that we can open up those conversations, get the talking going, and forgiveness. As a psychologist, you understand this as well as I do. That
Huge.
That is at the core, really, of hurting, of healing some of the hurts that are out there. It's a powerful concept. Russ, thank you. And your voice is a little rumbly today. That's your Valentine's Day surprise, I guess.
Yes, I'm working through a cold and hoping to get rid of it before I leave the country in a couple of days.
Well, all the best to you. Thank you for sharing those ideas with us here today. Appreciate it. Dr. Russ Gaede. Weighing 20 questions. That's part of the love equation. Going back to this book, I have to give some props to my friend Devin Thorpe. Devin, come join me here. Let's see, we're going to add you.
Pleasure to be here.
Devin, superpowers. I'm sitting here looking at your latest book, Superpowers for Good. And I love the way in this book you have identified some of the brilliance that exists on our planet. People are doing inspiring things in powerful ways, but it's all based on principle. It's not magic. It's not luck. And you're one of those people who's a connector. And we have to give you some extra props here today, Devin, because you were the president of the National Speakers Association Mountain West chapter, our group that's gathered here today. We're all part of that chapter. And you were the president at the time that we put together this book that we're talking about today. And
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
that was a big project. You put in a lot of work. You're our hero as a result.
Well, it was Dan's idea. We got to give Dan the props for having the idea. That I happened to be in the room when he had it and volunteered to put it together. It was a fun project to do.
Well, you definitely put the legs under that project and you made it happen. What a blessing that's been to so many people because of the reach of that book through the professional speakers that were involved in it. Devin, you've got some amazing ideas. I know 5 minutes is not much time for such a brilliant mind, but we'll just take a moment to enlighten us. We would love to hear from you.
Well, yeah, one of the things that we focused on in Superpowers for Good, and of course, what Paul didn't mention is that I quote Paul rather extensively in the book because he's a genius. And Leta, who's on the panel today, is also featured in the book. But one of the people in the book that I profile is a woman by the name of Davinia Jones. And she was born to a rather impoverished teenage mother in Jamaica. And when she was born, her mother couldn't afford to take care of her. And so her mother gave her to be raised by a more affluent woman who was a nonprofit activist in Jamaica and who had resources. And so she was raised until she was 11 years old by this more well-heeled woman who gave her all the resources. And so she was going to school and experiencing all of the things that we all think of as normal, those of us who are fortunate enough to have access to YouTube and Zoom today. And yet, when she was 11 years old, that woman died. And she went back to live with her mother. And her mother was still living in difficult circumstances. And so she experienced poverty as a sudden striking change in her life. And so she was walking home from school with her brother one day, and some thugs came up with guns, and one of them put the gun right to her brother's chest and demanded money or something. And she just froze. She just panicked, and he screamed at her to go home. And so she ran home all the way, and then she just burst into the house screaming, "He's dead, he's dead." She more or less coherently grabbed her mother. They ran back to where her brother still was standing with a gun in his chest. And her mother, in a fit of motherly courage, walked up to the gunman, grabbed the gun, and put the gun on her own chest and said, "If you want to kill him, you have to kill me first." Well, this kid apparently was afraid of the consequences, moral or otherwise, of killing a woman, and put the gun down and walked away. But that experience framed her life. After she immigrated to the United States and became more affluent herself, she organized a nonprofit to help girls get to school in places like Haiti and Jamaica, where it's difficult. So she's doing amazing work. But I asked her, and I asked a lot of people over the years on my podcast, what is your superpower? And of course, Leta was one of those that was on my show and that answered that question and was featured in the book. But Davinia answered the question. She said her superpower was unconditional love. Wow. That is kind of heavy in a way, especially if you try to think about how could I begin to develop that strength? How could I manifest unconditional love? And I will tell you, I don't do it. I don't do it well. But I looked at her and I looked at some of the research and I came up with a fairly simple 3-step plan for modeling her, for becoming more like Davinia and becoming more loving, unconditional. And the first step I identified was to forgive yourself. And the reason is it's hard to love other people if we demand that they be perfect, right? And so the first step of forgiving ourselves is to identify what we have done wrong. And the truth of the matter is, most of us can identify things that we have done wrong. Maybe we never got caught. Maybe we're the only ones who know. But if we can identify the things that we've done wrong and forgive ourselves for those things, I think it helps us build empathy and compassion and understanding for other people. Recognize it's easy to recognize other people are flawed. It's rather easy to see how they aren't perfect. So then, as you think about strangers, or maybe people who are in an opposite political party, or who are on the other team, or whatever, people who are of a different religion, whatever might be different about them, and you want to develop love and respect for them, sometimes it's hard to feel it. It may not be natural. And so the first step, or the next step, is to act as if you love them, right? There's good evidence in the science to suggest that our minds and hearts are changed by what we do. Doing something kind for something we don't love, for someone we don't love, will help us feel love for that person. And the third step I recommend, if you really want to be serious about this, practice every day. Try to find some opportunity to do something for someone you may not naturally have a kinship with. Do something kind for that person. Do something loving. Do something generous, even if it's just a text or a tweet in their direction to express love, admiration, or kindness. So those three steps: forgive yourself, act as if you love someone, practice daily. That will help us develop that unconditional love that Davinia developed after experiencing poverty and then overcoming that. So anyway, let's do that. Unconditional love.
You know what you're sharing today, Devin, is so psychologically sound. It is spot on. When you start with forgive yourself, sometimes we're out there being so compassionate and kind to everyone else, but we're beating ourselves to a bloody pulp, just ruthlessly and violently, sometimes being so unkind to ourselves. And it's hard to come from that place and actually do something. Your second step was act as if. And that ties right into what we call the cognitive triad. What we think, what we feel, and what we do all affect each other. And so as you do something, it will change your thoughts and your feelings. And then that practice, I mean, got to put in the reps, right?
Yep. That's something you've taught me.
Devin, you're doing some good in this world.
Oh, thank you. We're trying.
This is so much fun for me too, because as I get to spend time with my friends here this morning and just share it with all of you who are watching today, I hope you're getting some benefit from this. If you're watching us right now on YouTube and you like what you're hearing, would you just take a moment to click that little share button down below your screen and share it? Put it on your Facebook feed. Share it with someone that you think could use a little boost today. These amazing individuals that I've invited to join me here today, I'm just so honored by their presence and by your presence as you're listening in. We've got a couple of more amazing people on our panel. I'm looking at Mitch. I'm wondering if you're ready to roll. Let's see if we can get Mitch in here. I think he's waving at me. Okay, here you come. All right, unmute yourself, Mitch, as I introduce one of my road buddies. Mitch and I have got a couple of trips under our belt where we have gone to conferences together. We've been on the road together a number of times, and I have just so much enjoyed getting to know Mitch Seehusen, who is a speaker and also a past president of the National Speakers Association Mountain West chapter. Mitch included a chapter in our love book about the power of a mother's love. And there it is, the power of love. Mitch, you nailed it with that. And we've got a lot of people, especially on our YouTube channel, who are mothers. And they need to know the influence that they're having on this world. That's one of the reasons I invited you today. Mitch, enlighten us.
I thought the reason you invited me was because I was going to give you my review of the Super Bowl from yesterday. I was kind of thinking that was it, like what my favorite plays were.
That's for another video.
The most touchdowns. Oh, that's a different call than this one?
That's different.
I got it backwards. It's wrong. Yeah, it's interesting. In 1987, in August 1987, I was in Detroit Metro Airport when Northwest Airlines Flight 255 crashed and burned. And it was a very strange experience because I was working for a company that was in Jackson, Michigan area. I had been home for the weekend, and it was a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. I spent all day traveling back to Detroit. I had just picked up my suit bag. I had gone through the muggy Detroit evening to the van. It was a Chevy Astro van. It was on the very top deck of the parking structure. And I opened the back, put my suit bag in the back, and shut the door. And was just getting ready to walk around, start up the van, and head to the west to Jackson, Michigan, staying at the Holodome, which is always great, especially when you had one of those rooms that was right on the pool. Smelled like chlorine for the entire week. It was really awesome. But what would happen then was just bizarre. I mean, I'm taking hundreds of flights, thousands of flights in my career. And all of a sudden I'm standing there and I hear a jet revving up behind me. It was a DC-9 McDonnell Douglas MD-92 for anybody, aviation geeks at home. And you could hear the engines revving up. And for some reason, I just stopped. I turned around and watched the plane. And as I started to watch, the plane started to roll down the runway. And as I looked off to the horizon, waiting for the plane to lift up, as it does, right? When it gets to the end of the runway, there was a small fireball, followed by a much larger fireball. So, like just imagine a mushroom cloud from the nuclear bomb. I mean, that's what my brain was thinking. It's like, oh my goodness, it was just starting to get dark. It was at dusk. So I quickly got in the van, started it up, put it in drive. They had a circular exit, which is kind of cool. I guess a lot of airports do if you're in the short-term parking. I was on like the 6th deck, came all the way around, got down, paid for my parking, headed to the exit for the airport. And instead of going left where I was supposed to go to safety, I had to work really early in the morning. I went to the right because I just had to know what had happened. And as I went along I-94, I got there before the first responders got there. And flight Northwest Airlines 255 had crashed on takeoff. As it started to take off, the flaps had not been set. For those of you that have vivid memories of August of 1987, this was in the news for a very long time. The flaps were not set. The plane did not have the proper lift. And on takeoff, the left wing clipped the light pole in the budget rental car. And that caused it to tilt. And as it tilted, it didn't get the right lift. It hit a railway bridge. And as it hit the railway bridge, it started to tumble end over end and come apart in pieces. And as a result, Middle Belt Road was one of these roads that came down and all the roads went over the top. So the freeway went over the top. And this whole road, it's August in Detroit, right? And so all the weeds and everything are on fire. The cement is on fire. The blacktop is on fire. And I just parked the van with the windows down and just sat there. Just numb. And I wept because, I had just witnessed a huge loss of human life, a huge tragedy. And the smell was unbelievable. The smell of burning fuel and unfortunately the people who perished on this flight. It's sort of interesting that Dr. Paul invited me today to be here because last week I was actually in Detroit. I was in Denver. And there's a young guy, that I hired right out of the University of Wisconsin a few years ago, 92, 93. And somehow or other, we were talking about Northwest 255, and he said, wait a minute, you were an eyewitness to that plane crash? I said, yeah. He said, I was in high school in Detroit. He goes, it was always on the news. It was crazy. He said, I had no idea. And he said, and by the way, I worked for you for 6 years. You never mentioned it. That's true. The only person I ever discussed this, being an eyewitness with was my wife, who was flying out the following weekend to meet me and spend some time. And the friend that I was really close with in the training department with the company I was working for. And other than that, I didn't talk about it. It was I don't know, it was a form of survivor's guilt in some ways. As I look back on it now, why was my flight saved, and why did all these people suddenly just perish? And you looked at that scene and everything's on fire. There was fire between the eastbound and westbound. And I kind of came to my senses as the first responders started to arrive. You could hear the sirens, you could see the lights. And I kind of came out of this fog. And so immediately I knew that I was going to have to get off the freeway. There was no way I was going to be able to turn around and take I-94 back to Jackson, to where I was staying, where my hotel was. And instead I went a couple of exits down, went to the north, and took surface streets back. Now remember, this is 1987. There is no GPS. There are no cell phones, none of this. The fortunate thing was there was the news, the nighttime news. And for those of you that know about the East Coast, the nighttime news comes on at 11 p.m., not at 10 p.m. I remember being there all the time, and they would say, they would tease it during the football game, like last night, plane crash, Detroit Metro this evening, film at 11, because it was film. It wasn't video. It wasn't a cell phone. It was film. And when I got to there, I was just shaken. I was just shaken to the core. The first thing I did was turn on the TV in the hotel room. And of course, plane crash, at night. By the time the first responders got there, the cameras were not that good, late 80s. So all you saw was, fire, first responder. You heard a lot about it. And they said, no survivors, no survivors, no survivors, no survivors. There was no way anyone could have survived. No survivors, no survivors, no survivors, no survivors. And in the morning, we would find out that that was not the case, because little Celia Sheehan had survived. And she had survived because her mother cradled her and protected her from the crash and from the fire. And she was found by a firefighter who was clearing the debris. And he started to hear some whimpering and some crying. And he moved some debris. Some of his fellow firefighters helped him move the debris. And there she was. And at this point, I had heard varying parts of the story. At one point, I'd heard that she was in her mother's arms. Well, being an engineer by work, but not by necessary degree, you realize there's no way, with that tumbling of the plane and how the whole thing came apart, the whole structure of the plane came apart, she could have survived, not being seat belted in. She was seat belted in. But her mother cradled her and held her and protected her from the fire. They figured that was the only way she survived. They took her from Detroit area to Ann Arbor, to the University of Michigan, by ambulance, right? Because we didn't have all these medical helicopters that we do today. We've made so many advances, and she was in the burn unit at the University of Michigan Hospital for months and months and months and months. And we would learn that both of her parents and her brother perished in this terrible plane crash. And she had some relatives. She had an aunt and uncle that lived in the South. And for a long time, the media was very protective and did not ever mention where she was. And after about 20 years, they finally mentioned that she was with some relatives in, I believe it's Alabama. And she grew up. And at the 25-year anniversary in 2000, is that right? Do my math here, 15, 25. So 2012, there was a 25-year anniversary of the plane crash. And there's also a video, and it was called Lone Survivors. You can look this crash up on YouTube, and it's just, it's crazy. I actually did that to kind of do some more research on the chapter that I wrote to get some of the facts straight. And seeing all the pictures again brought it all back. It was just crazy. And it was a traumatic experience, but it was also a very healing experience to get this story out and to share it with others. And I could let it go. I no longer, kept it in my heart, kept it in my soul, saved away. I talked about it. I shared with it. And it's an amazing experience. And this little girl got married, is doing great in life. She has a tattoo of an airplane right here on her arm. That's the airplane of the crash, in memorial to her parents and to her brother. And it's just an amazing thing to remember that from the worst circumstances, miracles happen. And I didn't witness just a tragedy, but I also witnessed a miracle. And for probably a very long time, I didn't really look at it as a miracle because that's what it was.
Wow. Such an incredible story, Mitch. And the way that symbolizes the power of a mother's love. We hear these stories all the time, and it's so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that with us here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Mitchell Seehusen, folks. I always get his middle initial right. So we've got a little run.
It's G, not P. Dr. Paul calls it P simply because he's Paul.
Mitchell G. Seehusen.
Logical positive Paul.
I call him Mitchell
P.
Seehusen. So
The fact that I actually have a credit card from my dad's estate and the middle initial is P, and it's his fault because Siri and Alexa are always listening. Quiet, Alexa. They're always listening to us. AI is always listening. And I'm still confused as to whether it was the first shot, the second shot, or the booster where we got microchipped. And nobody's been able to tell me that yet. So if you do, write to Dr. Paul and say the microchip was in the, whatever dose.
Yeah, don't listen to everything Mitch says. All right, here we go. Don't
believe everything you think, Dr. Paul. Don't believe everything you think.
Everything you think. My friend Leta Greene is up next. Leta she did a little chapter in our book called The Love Equation, I believe it was, and tied it into some kind of a formula. But you know what? One of her recent books, Love Me Too, has made quite an impact as well, as she is inviting people to step out of what I call the victim paradigm and into the agent paradigm. Leta has been so instrumental in helping people to take a higher level of control over their own life. Her first book, How to Embrace Your Inner Hotness, is what got her onto my podcast to begin with. And she's just doing a phenomenal job. Let's see, Leta, are you ready to go? Here she comes. We'll get you to unmute yourself. This is hashtag Zoom issues.
Sorry, no, I stepped away because my missionary is talking to my husband right now. I have a son who is in Colombia for the next 2 years. So, okay, so I'm excited to share with you guys.
Well, let's hear it, Leta. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm assuming you introduced me because I was off talking to my kid, but talk about the power of love. Being a mom, great segue to Mitch. Not quite the same thing, but I'm thrilled to have raised a kid that is willing to go and serve people on the other side of the world. In my chapter of Love Equation, I hate to wreck it for all of you math nerds out there. I don't do math. And that is what the story is about, is my traumatic experience of doing math in the 3rd grade and cheating my whole entire way through, copying what the kids were saying to me, because I'm in front of everybody and you're supposed to pass it off, and I couldn't pass it off. And so I just lip read Jenny Jackson, who told me what to do. And so I sat down from that being like, you know what? I am dumb. Just like everyone has ever told me, meaning grandma and, my family culture. And I'm going to add that to my list. I'm ugly. And it's just true. And so I made a decision. I would never be in front of people again. And I would try to hide and live small so that I didn't attract attention. I completely messed up on that goal. what can you do? You don't get everything you want in life, right? But it all goes back to, what we're talking about. And, several of you have already set this up perfectly, and about a principle that I call vanity prayers. And every day when I'm getting ready, I sit there and I say good things to me, not lies. I don't tell myself that my chin is a structured chin. I say, I love this because I got it from my father. Everyone in my dad's family has this. And my stomach that I call the 3 C's, children, cheesecake, and chocolate, I would do all of that again. And it's not the children that ruin your midsection, it's the cheesecake and chocolate. But I made a choice and I stand by that choice. So, we make decisions and we, project out into the world the stories that we've told ourselves. And so where do we reprogram that? That's in our vanity prayer time. So when I'm getting dressed this morning, I was like, dang, I'm having a good hair day. And I am going to be so fantastic when I'm meeting with my fellow Rockstar speakers. Thank you, Paul, for organizing this. I'm going to do so well for them. I'm going to give them that. And I'm going to give my family this. And I'm going to give my business this. And I'm really putting not just my appearance that I need for the day, because I'm on Zoom. I had to at least wear a nice top. I went ahead and went the extra mile and wore some nice pants too. You're welcome. Right. But I got dressed for my purpose for the day. I got dressed for what I needed to present my outward appearance, but more importantly, what do I need to present and project from here and from here? Which leads me to a story, a little add-on to what I wrote in the book. When I was a newlywed, and anyone who's been married for more than a few minutes might maybe have possibly had a disagreement with their spouse. Maybe, right? I mean, I hate to ruin to any engaged couples, because yes, your spouse to be is perfect. Other people's might have had an issue. So for those of you, the 4 of you who had a disagreement with a spouse, my husband and I had a disagreement. And so the next morning I was doing what all good wives do, praying for my spouse to be fixed by God. Fix him, like go in and fix this man. And I actually, speaking of missions, served a mission among the deaf people. So for an 18-month period, I'm serving and living among the deaf. And so ironically, as though I'm a professional speaker, I can also not talk. I can do it in sign language. So a lot of times I pray with my eyes open, and I'll just kind of fixate on something just to kind of, focus my ADD brain. And just that was kind of how you pray in sign language. It doesn't work when you're praying in a group and somebody's praying and you are not, you have to at least look at them, right? So I'm kind of fixating on this thing, and I see this sword that my husband has collected from his missionary service in the Canary Islands. And as I've been praying to have my husband fixed because he is wrong, and I'm sure if I could remember what that fight was about, and I told all of my girlfriends, they would all be like, oh my crap, your husband is a total jerk. I hate him so much. Like what, right? If I told people, but that's the thing. We got to direct our complaints to something that can help us. And that can be a therapist, that can be, and I'm not saying therapists are God, but they got to make sure they're in line with good advice, right? And God always has good advice. So I'm praying and I see this sword, and this analogy comes to my mind. Do I have the surgical ability to take that sword and cut out of my husband the thing I don't love and retain the thing that I do love? And I was like, you know what? The thing I don't love, a lot of times is attached to something I do love. My husband's a type A, and he is tasks first, and I am people first. And so sometimes those two oppositions kind of, create a little bit, like he comes in the door and he's like, hey, what, he's going over the to-do list. And I'm like, kiss me passionately, like you haven't seen me all day, right? We have a different approach to things. And I'm sure the fight was around something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, but I also love that my type A husband gets his crap done. In fact, I have become a more get my stuff done kind of person, being related to him. Well, being related. Actually, we're not related. I would like to make that really clear. Being connected to him, because those traits have rubbed off on me. We just celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary. What? 25th, he's taken me somewhere epic. Anyway, but, and then my connecting with people and being really friendly. And right, has rubbed off on him. Sometimes he'll be talking to someone and then he'll go, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask how you are. How are you? Right? That's something that has rubbed off. But at this point, we're just these two opposite forces. And I want to cut something out of him. And I realized I don't have that surgical ability, because that trait of get it done is something I love, but it was probably what was irritating me too. And I would suggest that a lot of us, that when we're upset with our spouses or someone else that we love, but it's Valentine's Day, that we might be in the same kind of situation I was. My husband probably hates that I talk so much. But yet the night we met, that I was like, dancing and pretending to be a butterfly, he was like, man, this girl is fun. But sometimes at night, he's like, shh, shh, right? It's the same thing. And then with that analogy that God downloaded to me, I felt very distinctly that I needed to trust my husband to him. Now, barring dysfunction or abuse or addiction, most of us are probably pretty workable. And if we're married to somebody, we actually probably want to stay married, right? So did I trust my husband enough in his conviction and relationship with God to work on who he was becoming? Because he and I are not the same people we were 24 years ago. We have grown. We've become, in my case, I'm more talkative. Poor guy, right? What's he going to do? And then people pay me to talk. I mean, it's just getting worse. Just a moment of silence for Nathan. That's my lover, man. Anyway, so I just left it to God. And about 3 days later, my husband, we pray before we go to bed. And we did a little prayer, and he was kind of quiet. And I said, what are you thinking? And he said, I do X, Y, and Z. And then he started to share something from his childhood. And I realized that X, Y, and Z could be kind of difficult. And I realized I do it because of this. And he started talking about him as a little boy and shared things with me that were beautiful and tender that I can remember today, and gave me new insight into who he was and what his experiences were. And X, Y, and Z didn't seem as big a deal. But because he was addressing the source of it, the behavior started to change. And again, I had empathy because I had gotten to know the little boy. And additionally in that, because of my increased compassion and empathy towards my husband, it let me share more things about my childhood and looking at my behaviors and my motivations. And the truth was, if I had gone to my husband and said, you do X, Y, and Z, and it's super annoying, and I cried and I prayed and God has to fix you, that out of love for me, he would have probably focused really hard on changing X, Y, and Z, but without looking at where it came from, he would just be forcing himself to change a behavior. And one of the points that I make in my chapter, Love Equation, is that we can only give what we possess. And so I couldn't give math to someone else, like my children, because I don't do the math. So I compensated that by marrying someone who's an electrical engineer, math and physics minor. He can do the math. He knows the math. The kids didn't know till they're about 13 that I wasn't good at this, but there was never a day that I could have been like, let's sit down and have a math conversation. But if we are trying to project into the world what we think we should be for others around us, instead of really figuring out what we are meant to be and who and how, and looking and analyzing and getting into all of that nitty-gritty of why we do the things that we do, then we are doing things from the wrong motivation, and it will not sustain. And it's really robbing the people around us of the greatest joy and depth of love. And I'm not just talking about romantic love, but our relationships and our connections and everything like that, that anytime I find myself having an obstacle, sadly, a lot of times it goes back to something that happened in my childhood. And that's where a good therapist, I happen to know a couple on this, Dr. Paul and Russ, right? Just happened to, but we have to do that work. We have to do that work on ourselves. And I'd like to leave you guys with this, that you're worth the work. you're worth the effort, and it's worth taking that little kid inside of you and hugging them and saying, you know what, I can't change what happened for you, but dang, your story is awesome.
Wow, Leta, you've reminded us all again, it's a package deal. It is a package deal. We've all got those parts of us, all of which can be lovable. We could go on, Leta, but we're going to give Dan some time too.
Hey,
And
Dr.
I
Paul?
apologize. I'm going to watch this on the replay, Dan, but my missionary is calling from Colombia. So
As much as you love us, you love him a little bit more.
just a little bit.
Love on him a little.
Paul?
Hey, Russ.
I had a couple of thoughts on what Leta said. Two things that she mentioned really struck a chord. That a lot of times we don't remember the arguments we have with our spouses a day later or a week later. And so it kind of goes to show how significant are they really? Probably not very.
Good point.
As Leta pointed out, her husband's type A, she is not. We are attracted to those that complete us. If Leta had married somebody just like her,
It would be a constant party and we'd never get anything done.
exactly.
One of you would be unnecessary.
So we always talk about opposites attract. I disagree. I feel that we find, whether friendships or marriages, people that complete us. But that's what creates a lot of the issues in our marriage. And that's where that consistent love and forgiveness and communication really need to come in. So thank you, Leta. That
Awesome.
really struck
I'm glad
a chord.
you approved my message, Dr. Russ.
I love you, Leta.
I know that. I love you too. I love everybody. I'm sorry, but talking of love, I'm going to go talk to my missionary.
Go join your family, Leta. Thank you so much for joining us here. I'm going to bring on another lovable fella. Dan, you ready to roll, man?
I am.
I got to tell you, and I'm glad that I can actually hear your voice because
Who would have thought?
some voice stuff, I know. And when you agreed to join us here today, I was just like, awesome. We get to hear from Dan, the author of The Art of Significance and about 50 other books. I don't know how many you've written, Dan, but I got a bunch on my shelf. This, folks, as you hear from this man next, you have to understand when we put this book together, and Dan, I think this was your idea. Let's see if we can give people something that they can use to put into people's hands as a marketing. Some of our speakers had not yet written a book, and so this idea came. We've already talked to Devin, who put the legs under it. But Dan, you're one of our Hall of Famers. You're on every cover of every version of this book, along with Chad Hymas. What an honor to be on the same page with him. And you've made such a profound difference in the significant career that you have had, inspiring people around the globe. And I'm just so honored that you're here with us and that I get to call you my friend. Dan,
Dr. Paul.
the mic is yours.
It's an honor to be on this podcast, this YouTube panel with all these superstars. Devin Thorpe, he and I had such a unique and intimate relationship as friends and as colleagues while he was president of the chapter, the Mountain West chapter. He was really the inspiration behind everything any of us ever did. He took our chapter to the very next level in a way that only he could, which validates timing is everything, being the right person at the right time in the right place, and that there's more serendipity involved when we're trying to make a difference in the world. So I just want all of your fans and all of your followers, Dr. Paul, to know how much I love and respect these individuals on this panel. And as I've listened intently, I'm so glad you put me on last, although I hope we hear from you, brother. It's given me a chance to just tune in, to listen. I've never heard Mitch. I've never heard that story, brother. The update of Devin's experiences as he goes around in this self-knighted philanthropy that he is so famous for. And Karen and Michelle, all of you, Russ, you know how much I love and respect all of you. Leta's a piece of work. Thanks for letting me follow her. She needs 7 cups of coffee just to calm down. You know, she's one of those unique individuals that we all just love and adore. You know, as I've been sitting there learning, I think maybe I could just throw in my 2 cents. In my experience, and I'm older than all of you, put together, probably aggregate. I think love is where it's at, you know. Love is everything, and you know, all you need is love, as the Beatles reminded us about. And so my take in this book, this anthology collection of experts, I know my topic is usually significance. And if I could just throw in my 2 cents about how for the last 30 plus years, I've tried to figure out how to transform my life, our lives from success to significance. And as I finished my book tour with this last book that you just highlighted, Dr. Paul, it was published by Penguin Random House, and they put me on this big book tour. And the most frequently asked question was, what's the difference between success and significance? Do you have to be successful before you can become significant? And how did you come up with such a provocative or evocative title? And let me just share an experience that really kind of illuminated my thoughts to the point where I decided to compile my thoughts and feelings, my mindset, my heart set in the art of significance. I was in a conversation with one of my football teammates, and he was drafted into the National Football League in the 2nd round by the Philadelphia Eagles. And after 2 years in the Eagles organization, he's traded to my Oakland Raiders. And after 4 years in the league, playing at the highest Pro Bowl status, one day he walks out of practice, quits, never to play again. Why? He loved being a football player, but he hated playing football. He got what he thought he wanted, but he hated what he got. And those of us who are striving to live lives of success have bought into Covey's limiting belief to begin with the end in mind. If I could just get married, I'm not happy being single. If I could just get married, I'll be happy. If I could just graduate from high school, if I could just get my degree, then I'll be somebody. If this could just possibly happen in my life, then I'm going to make my move. Then I'll be qualified enough to be that best version of myself. And if you think about it, when you begin with the end in mind, it forces you to focus on a destination that's impressive, because we're always competing against others. Nice car, nice house, nice income, nice title. And when you compete against others, most often it makes you bitter. But when you compete against yourself, it always makes you better. So when we start talking about love and relationships, we've got to stop competing and comparing our relationship with even our spouse or significant other, with the relationship that they have with themselves, because that's where every relationship with someone else begins. We have to love ourselves before we can love someone else. We have to trust ourselves before we can trust someone else. So if you begin with the end in mind, it forces you to focus on a destination that's impressive. Do your best to manage people and reward results. Oh, wow, I finally got through this day. Wow, I finally passed the test. I am now somebody because I married this person. No, happily ever after is a day at a time proposition. We always know that. And so what would happen in a relationship, what would happen in a discussion about love on Valentine's Day, if from now on and forevermore we committed to beginning with the why in mind? Why was I attracted to this person? We don't attract who we want, we attract who we are. We attract what we believe we deserve based on the energy and vibration and the frequency of that energy and vibration, which is science when it comes to relationships. You see, if we begin with the why in mind, it actually equips us, it empowers us to focus on a journey that's important. So there's never a check the box, today was a good day. No, right now needs to be everything it has the potential to be. The communication right now, to Dr. Russ's point, has to be the very best and the highest level and deepest level it can possibly be right now. At some point, when we understand the significance of beginning with the why in mind and focus on the journey that's important, it allows us to manage expectations and reward effort. So there's never a destination, which means in relationships, when we have a spiff and a spat, as Leta referred to, and we all do, it's all about the rebound rate. It's about how quickly we can respond, not react. It's about how quickly we can get back up and, as Dr. Russ says, forgive. It's about how quickly we can finely tune that communication. And so when I talk about love and relationships in the concept and context of significance, we have to laugh a little bit about the number one limiting belief about where we're going and what is it going to look like when we get there. And, you know, this is, this can be this and this can be that. And the illustration I always use, when my Aunt Lucy was 63 years old, she started walking 5 miles every day. Now she's 91 and we don't know where she is. And we laugh. But the number one limiting belief that holds us back is always trying to live in the future or live in the past. When we live in the past, it causes depression. When we live in the future, it causes anxiety and worry. It causes stress. But when we can just look at life in the same context of ordering an Uber ride, if you lie about where you are, the directions won't work. It allows us to transfer and transform our lives from successful, I hope, to significance. I am. It is right now. So to that, let me just throw out my definition of love. Love is a commitment, not a way of feeling, which means it's the journey. It's every day. Love is a commitment, not a way of feeling. Romance is not love. Romance comes from a Greek word that means erotic. So I don't even want to talk about it. But if you think about it in these terms, if I love you because you're beautiful, that's romance. But if you're beautiful because I love you, that's real love. It's a value creating love that inspires us to be the best that we can be. Yet how many of us have confused love commitment with romance emotion? What have we said our whole lives? Oh, I love him so much, he makes me feel differently than I've ever felt before. Oh, I love her so much, she makes me feel differently than I've ever felt before. So do breakfast burritos. If you think you're in love, just maybe you need a long, cold shower and a box of Rolaids. What's my point? I love you are not the three most powerful commitment-oriented words in this world because we confuse the definition of it. We think it's emotional transfer. We think it's giddy lust. No, that could be an element of love because we need that traction. We need that physical attraction. We need that, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hold and make love with this significant human being in my life, which is the ultimate expression. Think about how deep our communication is with a kiss, through a kiss, and we speak no words at all. How deep our communication is just in a hug where you're the last one to let go without letting words get in the way. So the three most powerful commitment-oriented words in this world are not, I love you. They sound nice, but they're not action-oriented, taking charge of making this relationship everything it has the potential to be right now. The three most powerful, significant words that transfer our success to significance are I need you. Think about this. Most people I know like themselves. Most of us hope that we can love ourselves. Most people feel like they're liked. Most people feel that they're loved. But if you don't believe in your heart of hearts, like Mitch said, you don't believe everything that you think. If you don't truly believe that you're needed, how in the world can you even get up in the morning? How can you even find purpose and meaning in your life, which gives you a reason to love someone else, a reason to serve? But when you understand the significance of I need you, and that it's our responsibility to do something on a daily basis to prove to ourselves that we are needed, I can go days, I can finish a speech, I can be on the road for 5 days in a row and have no one come up to me and say, how are you, Dad? They don't care. So what am I supposed to do? Just go back to my hotel room and feel sorry for myself? Nobody likes me. I'll go eat worms. No. We can't afford to wait for somebody to tell us or show us that we are loved or that we are needed, which means we must do something on a daily basis to prove to ourselves that we are needed. So the kicker in relationships, the kicker in expressing love, giving love, and feeling love is to do something on a daily basis where we serve others. I love you. I need you. Let me just conclude by saying that by issuing a challenge. If tonight, at the end of Valentine's Day, you lean over to your spouse or your significant other, and instead of saying, I love you, you say, I need you, watch their response, watch their nonverbal communication, watch their oh, really? Which will change your conversation and deepen your understanding of what true love is. It's give, 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 way before we take. It's serve, 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 which means if any time in your life you're feeling lonely, if you're alone in a crowded room, lonely in a loved one's arms, if you're depressed, if for some reason you feel like you've been shafted, what we have to do is instead of looking inside, we look outward and turn every sales pitch into a serve pitch if we're in business, and figure out ways to serve that individual right now with the reciprocating impact that when we serve others, we also are proving to ourselves that we are needed, which means both the giver and the receiver of service are transformed in the process, and we move from successful to being significant, which takes our relationship to a completely different conversation in a completely different place. Because whenever I'm in a spiff with my wife after 41 years, whenever I'm in a spiff with one of my children or with a colleague or with one of my old sports teammates, instead of focusing in on what I don't have and what they are not giving me, if I focus in on what I'm grateful for and what I do have and what I can give to them, the entire equation changes. So my contribution to all of you as professional speakers is the reason why we love our profession so much. And we've never missed a speech, hopping on a bus, a train if necessary, renting a car, driving 7 hours one way when our flight's canceled, driving to make that speech, is because in the back of our minds and in the deep depth of our hearts, we are proving to ourselves that we are needed and giving everything we've got when less would be sufficient, not just to serve others, but in the process, validating to ourselves that we have a reason to love ourselves. And as I said at the beginning, we must love ourselves before we can truly love someone else. Otherwise, something will get in the way. Back to you, Dr. Paul.
Thing of beauty, Dan. I could listen to you forever.
My voice is usually better than this, and now I'm excited on this Zoom call, so I got to calm down.
Just breathe a little. You know, Dan, I heard from you once, and it's probably more about what we hear than what's actually said. But I heard from you years ago, maybe decades ago by now, I don't know, that speakers change lives. And you've changed mine.
You've changed mine as well, Ross. You really have. I think the mutual respect and support and love that we share on this panel is extraordinary because it's really about chemistry. It's not what we do, it's with whom we do it. And I can publicly look at every single one of you on this Brady Bunch screen, and you already know how much I admire you and adore you and appreciate the talks and the time we've spent with each other for different reasons at different levels. And I feel like I really do have a personal relationship with each one of you. And that's the magic of Dr. Paul. You have this, you're a chemist, you always have been, and you help us fix or heal or deepen our relationships through unveiling and revealing the chemistry. You know, this little bit didn't work, this little element didn't work, there was a collision, there was an explosion. Let's figure out what elements we now need to put in to the flask to make it a wonderful experience. And you're the master chemist. I love you for that. Thank you.
Well, I brought up the gallery view so that our viewers can see this amazing panel. We've got a little still shot of Leta because she's still loving on her missionary. Thank you to all of you who have been here on this panel today. It's Valentine's Day in the United States, and we're talking about love. If I could take just one moment to acknowledge something from my chapter of the book, I believe this fully, and you have all illustrated this so beautifully today on our call. There's no neutral option. It has to fall on one side of the spectrum or another. Either it's on the hate side or it's on the love side. And if that is true, then think about every interaction that you have today with the people in your life. And I call it a choice because, Dan, I'm agreeing with you and several other people who alluded to this as well. Love's not a feeling. It's a commitment. It's a way of showing up. It's a choice. And if you have to choose one side of the spectrum or the other, either it's love or it's hate. And I use the word hate because people hate the word hate. But either a little or a lot, that's where it's going to be on the spectrum. So ask yourself as you interact with your kids today, is this a loving interaction? Ask yourself with your spouse, your significant other, your partner. It's a loving interaction. How about the people that you work with or the people you interact with on social media? It's either love or hate. And we've got enough hate in this world. Thank you, friends, for joining me to support the love choice. The more we choose love, the better our world gets. And I think that's evidenced by these brilliant, amazing speakers and presenters who have joined me here today. You honor me with your presence. Those of you who spoke, those of you who are attending, those of you who are watching live on YouTube. And there's a lot of comments that are coming through on YouTube as well. We're feeling your love. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to turn you loose because you know what to do next, right? It's time, everybody, to go live on purpose. Choose love. We'll see you.
Dr. Paul, they're asking in the comments how to get your book.
Everyone, if you're watching on YouTube, we will put links in the notes once it goes to video status, so that you can have links there. Those of you who are here at Live on Purpose Central, you've got access to it already on the platform, but we'll include some links on the video.